Sorry, Craig, just let you know you're muted.
Sorry. Oh. Okay. Yeah, just unmute myself, I guess. So yeah, welcome to December edition of PHP London. Unfortunately, this year we're not in the pub. I think it's the first time in 5 or 6 years that we've not had our end of year kind of final talk of the year in a pub. A few drinks. It's a bit of a shame, but as the pandemic has caused that. Okay, cool. So, yeah, welcome. A few things to go through. Bit of housewarming before we get the talk started. So, let's click on this slide. So, sponsors. So, I'd like to thank Explore, who've sponsored us for 2 or 3 years, well, I think maybe 3 years now. So yeah, I'd like to thank them. We are looking for sponsors, so if you'd like to get involved and help us cover some of our costs, please do get in touch. Hopefully in the new year, when we're back, doing these kind of in person, we do like to provide drinks and pizzas to those who attend. So yeah, all sponsorship will help us with that. Code of conduct. So we do have a code of conduct. So if you just want to go to this URL, I'll just leave it up there for a second. So yeah, that covers in-person events and also online as well. All of these talks that we do. So please do check that out. We do have a Slack group as well. It's not all active, but if you'd like to join Slack, another Slack group of many. I've no doubt that most of you are in as well. But please, yeah, just check that out. Do some announcements in there sometimes. And yeah, if you just want to discuss the group as a whole or any feedback, please do join and leave that. Okay, and the final thing is speakers. So we're always on the lookout for speakers of all levels. So if you've never spoken before, or if you're a seasoned pro, so to speak, do get in touch via this link here. I think you should open a Google form if you just want to fill that out, and then we'll get notified of any talk suggestions that you have, and then we can maybe discuss if it's something that we'd like to see. Yeah, as long as it's PHP related or kind of developer focused, then yeah, please get in touch. And that's pretty much all of my housekeeping, I guess. Don't have any further announcements to make. Not heard anything about PHP UK conference, but I can probably in the next couple of weeks or so, we might have some announcements on that. So yeah, with that, I guess that's me over. I'd like to welcome our speaker for tonight. I'd like to welcome Jim. So here we go. So yeah. So over to you, Jim.
Thanks, Greg. Hello, everyone. You might have noticed I am wearing a penguin hoodie stroke jumper. It's got little feet and legs, which you can't see at the moment. Shout out to Gail, Dr. Gail Olis, who said if we were ever going to speak again in person after the COVID pandemic has finished, that we should all wear fancy dress, and it's Christmas, so I decided to just do it early. So here I am in all seriousness, with the eyes that sort of move around. But that's not what you came here for. You came here for turbocharged development with Docker, PHPStorm, and Xdebug. So here I am. I am Jim Seconde, developer advocate. Here's some stuff about me. I founded Brum PHP, which is on the far left with the bull, the Birmingham PHP user group, which is a continuation from PHP West Midlands. I co-host Fusion, which is a meetup stroke mini sort of evening conference type thing in Birmingham, which has just gone for its second virtual one with some amazing speakers, and has an amazing team behind it. And most importantly, the reason why I can do what I do is because of my employers, which are Jump24, which is a Laravel partnered studio in Birmingham. There is their website at the top. Second website down is my website, which has got a podcast, a music podcast, if you want to listen to strange records and hear me rabbit on about odd facts and things like that. There's supposed to be a tech podcast on there, which has got one episode on it, but unfortunately, I'm now a dad. I say unfortunately, that's not unfortunate at all. I'm a dad now, so that's kind of not important anymore. If you want to dogpile onto tweets, which has happened today on Twitter, you can look me up at Seconde. I mentioned Slack being sold, and everyone has gone absolutely mad about that, mostly with fairly bad, amusing takes. If you want to look me up on LinkedIn, there it is. And if you want to see a horrible graveyard of unfinished symphony projects, mostly, then there's my GitHub at Seconde. So let's move on. If my screen will allow it. Are you going to allow it? Man, my screen share is really not working very well today. Let's try resetting it. I've got this awful feeling that I'm going to have to do this throughout the whole of the talk. Can you put my screen up? Thanks. So you need to do debugging. It's a bit of a dry subject. So it's usually a good idea to do something that to try and inject some sort of humor type into it. So I like to call this kind of link sports casual debugging, which kind of explains where we are with the things that we can do with debugging. And this is named after none of my slides are going to update. That's brilliant. Should I start tinkering with stuff? That works. Should I just present from there? Are you happy with that? Okay, well, that sort of works with a bit of a... named after, obviously, Alan Partridge. There he is. Wow. So I've got like a chunk of... I'm just going to have to plow through this with technical issues. I do hope that my terminal and my IDE actually work. So here are three common debugging methods, right? We've got var dump and dd and dump and Xdebug. So the reason why I threw Alan Partridge in there, it completely ruined my flow, so I didn't really have time to actually explain what on earth it was that I was talking about, is... With sports casual debugging, we can compare them to cars. So var dump is a Ford Mondeo, which appeared in the mid to late 90s. It's kind of the definition of vanilla, the Mondeo man. Still littered around all the code bases and still sort of used by a lot of people. It's boring, but it gets the job done. DD and dump. I've gone for a BMW Mini on that because it's based on an old design from Cooper, Austin, something like that. I don't know. I don't drive, so this is all kind of in vain anyway. But it was taken over by industry leaders, and it's been souped up with a different brand underneath the hood, so it makes for a good debugging experience. So that's my BMW Mini there. And Xdebug is the Audi TT coupe edition or hard top or something like that, whatever that picture is. It's sporty and it's sleek and it looks mean and it looks like it should be really expensive, but the whole point of using that is it's actually not as inaccessible as you think it is. And that links us in with Xdebug because you think the thing is just sort of like it's some complicated thing out in the distance, but also, it's actually implementing it. We didn't find it that as difficult as you'd think. So tooling is a process. So at Jump24, my employer, all of the code that we ship, we're using continuous integration, is all of what we do is all about our tooling, right? So I've got a few sort of common icons of things there. So I've got Grum PHP, which runs PHP Code Sniffer. We do TDD first because everyone's doing that. Please don't work somewhere where that doesn't happen. And we're using Composer to run scripts and things like that on deployment where we can. All of our task runners are kind of all sort of hooked in together. So we ship code as a pipeline, as a process. So for our local development, all of this runs on Docker. We use Atlassian Cloud because everyone else does, and that's clearly not a great thing anymore. Jira's good, but just as long as you don't try and make it do all the things, and Atlassian really want you to do all the things. But we have everything sort of hooked up and integrated within Slack and Jira and Confluence, things like that. In our standards, PSR2, PSR12, everything in PHP Code Sniffer or Grum has to adhere to PSR12. Can't ship otherwise. Have Composer run the scripts as shown by the icon. Grum PHP runs loads of different task runner stuff. And as mentioned, we do TDD. And all of it is part of our CI. So the way that we approach things philosophically as developing software and shipping software is that we have a pipeline process. Therefore, the question that we asked is, why isn't, if we have Docker as the start of our stack, then why isn't Xdebug part of that stack? It's like a tool that's part of our tooling process from PHP to the DevOps world in between, right? And anyway, this is why it's relevant. So this talk is the fault of this man who is hounding me and following me around. I mean, granted, it is a talk on his tool, but he's watching tonight again because he wants to see if I've made the transition from Xdebug 2 to 3 successfully. We'll find out. Here is Derek Rethens. Here he is. Hello. And he put out a tweet, which is the reason why this talk exists, saying that if you don't use Xdebug, then you're an amateur. Everyone went absolutely mad about it. But it did get us thinking. We talked internally about what we thought about Xdebug, right? And here are the thoughts that we thought. It's been around for years. It's the de facto debugging suite where Ruby and Python have their default debuggers and REPLs. Xdebug is the PHP one, right? Probably the biggest feedback that you'll ever get from someone, especially if they haven't used it recently, is that it's complicated to set up. And on the back of that, we have Docker. If we're doing things with Docker, and because we're all completely mad Kubernetes, but not now because it's just been announced that Docker is not going to actually be supported in new Kubernetes. With everything like this, if you're going to do serverless frameworks and things like that, and Lambda's being thrown everywhere, is this not going to make something like Xdebug, if it was complicated before to set up on LAMP stacks locally, with virtualization platforms, is this not just going to be an absolute nightmare? And probably the key thing that everyone comes, every sort of conclusion that seems to have come, that a lot of people come to is, why not just use die dump, kill the request, dump out some stuff, rerun it. Those are the thoughts on Xdebug. But at Jump24, we had an internal discussion, but it doesn't, just because those are our thoughts. We thought, well, okay, well, if none of us have used it for years, then why don't we give it a test drive? And we need something to give it a test drive on, and you'll see the product because the product's open source, which is quite handy. We have something called Order, which is appropriately, this is a virtual talk, which is a ordering system for merchants. It's an open source ordering system. So if you want to go and have a look at the code for it, there it is. It's on GitHub, Order Core. If you want to look at the hosted version, you can go to Jump24's website and find the free version. But essentially, you can sign up as a merchant and say, I am a takeaway, I want to sell things, and you can hook up Stripe accounts, take payments, and Order is free. It does what Just Eat does, but it's free because we could, and we had AWS credits to spare. So why not do it? But it also gave us a lot of exercises. It gave us a lot of R&D. There's reasons behind it. This is what the stack looks like. So as I mentioned, we're a Laravel partner, so it's written in Laravel. We're transitioning bits of the front end to Vue. It's, as mentioned, hosted in GitHub. All of the pipelines are hooked up to the free tier of Circle CI because it's free. And if you want to run it locally, there's the whole Docker stack, and you'll see sort of some of that. So with that in mind, let's do a demo of setting up PHPStorm, Docker, and Xdebug. And now I start to panic to see if my connection or whatever on earth my screen is doing. I think it's Chrome that's doing this, actually. Let's just switch to the... Oh, that looks okay. That looks okay. Okay. What have we got? Cool. So I have I have order running right now. I've just done a Docker PS to show you that Docker is running and all the containers. We have an Nginx container. We have a PHP container. I'll get on to Webgrind later, and Redis to store sessions, and we have MySQL. So let's have a look in the IDE. That looks nice. If I go to have it in, we have our local Docker environment set up with Docker files. So this is an example of the, it's not an example, this is the Docker file. If you want to have a look on GitHub, you can actually look at it. So this is the Docker file. And I want to install Xdebug. So I'm going to do it in this section here. We're using Pickle. If you go onto Xdebug's documentation, you could find a couple of ways of installing it. But Pickle in Docker files tends to be the easiest. If you want to do it a bit more manual, you could probably use, if you're using Linux containers, use apt-get, get synaptic. But we've got Pickle install Redis. Here I'm going to do Pickle install Xdebug. And that's it. That's the end of the talk. Thank you very much for coming. Obviously, that's a lie. So from an operating system, from a system level perspective, that will install Xdebug on our container. That will install. I've cleared all of my caches from this talk, so now when it goes and fetches it, it will fetch Xdebug 3. So if I get lost or something goes wrong, it's probably because it's Xdebug 3, and I gave myself absolutely no time to prepare for it because I'm a dunce. About 2 hours. We'll see how it goes. Next step. We want to Xdebug has
Jim, I'm sorry, I'm just going to come in and interrupt there. We are having some issues with your screen where we're missing the left-hand side.
Yeah.
I thought it would just be better just to stop and see if we can resolve that rather than, because we're going to miss obviously quite big chunks of your screen there.
Luckily, the editor is on the right-hand side, but yeah, go for it. So what do you want me to do?
Do you want to just, I'll take your slides off. Do you want to just try a refresh of your screen and see if there were any issues? I don't know if you've got OBS running or anything else.
I've actually not got, I've not got OBS on actually. No. I've just got the, the screens really. Yeah. I did a podcast at the end of last week, and to be honest, the same thing happened.
Oh really? Okay. Well, we've got your screen back on. It looks like we've got a better. Looks like we've got Yeah. As soon as we'll see what happens. As I sort of run it, we'll see what happens. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
Okay. Feel free to chip in, Dan. I'm looking all at the right all the time to see like sort of if I scroll up on that. Yeah, okay, that looks all right. So, Pickle install Xdebug. So the next thing is Xdebug uses INI files. So we need to create an INI file, and we want to inject it. I'm going to inject it via Docker Compose. You can use it you can do it in the Docker file build if you want to. So if we go to here's our PHP folder. Luckily, Dan has actually told me to refresh my screen so we can actually see that folder. I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to call it xdebug.ini. And I'm going to paste configuration stuff for Xdebug. And it looks like this. So I'll just talk you through a couple of these things. So, oh, come on, you can do it. Just that the only thing it's not refreshing is where I've pasted stuff in. Oh man, this thing hates me. Let's try again. it's there. I am worried. I must say at this stage, I'm worried for the rest of the talk if it's just not updating. I've done this talk once with this platform before, about 3 weeks ago or 2 weeks ago, and it was absolutely fine. Okay, let's see how we get on. So, first thing is add an extension, Xdebug. So that just enables the extension. The next bit is use Xdebug 3, and this is Xdebug mode. So it switches on and off what you want to enable in Xdebug. And when it comes to various environments of staging or local or production, this is a pretty cool new feature. So we've got, if you put Xdebug off, Xdebug.mode off, the server won't run, and therefore it has absolutely no overhead, which is pretty much a godsend for when you want to have variables and things set, and you're injecting environment variables, but you want to modify them at runtime in a pipeline, and then production looks like this and UAT looks like this. Now you've got the option to do that within Xdebug, which is quite cool. Client host is what used to be known as remote IP or remote host. So client host is just the client IP address, and for this I put host.docker.internal. That is a reserved Docker internal IP address, so it just points it to the entry point to the Docker stack, which is good. And we have a new thing in Xdebug 3, which is called start with request. And start with request, yes, just means that if you hit a request and it hits the Xdebug server, if you put yes in there, it will just fire it and bring whatever is listening into the foreground, which is pretty cool. So with that in mind, I'm going to go to, I need to inject that into the Docker container now. So we do that via Docker Compose. No. Have you ever encountered this before?
No.
No, of course not.
Derek's wondering if there's some dodgy graphics drivers going on here.
It's just it's a MacBook. It's a MacBook Pro. So what I'm going to do now, this is going to be fun. I'm going to have to do some sort of some tinkering around.
I'll take your screen off for a moment, so you're free to tinker as needed.
I might do a complete switcheroo and see what happens.
Sure.
And now all of my sort of notes and stuff is right in front of me, and all of my actual code is here. So I'm going to be looking right the whole time.
Derek's having a bit of fun with us there. Yes, a Mac sounds like a dodgy graphics driver.
The Mac is not my choice of operating system, but as previously mentioned, I'm going to take off my screen because that's obviously resharing what you're looking at right now. Yeah, sure. And if I switch to all of my slick buttons now are basically not going to work. So you're just going to have to deal with me sort of clicking around the screen. Let's put that.
As you say, we delivered this. It was only about 3 weeks ago, wasn't it, or 2 weeks ago?
Yeah, and it was absolutely fine. Yeah. And my slides. Let's take the slides on here from Chrome.
Craig, do you want me to add you up as well?
Just saying, you've not updated the operating system to the newest Mac, have you?
No, I'm not a nutter.
I wasn't sure if that might be the reason since 2 weeks ago.
That's fair enough. Yeah, no, when Big Sur came out, I'm very reluctant until I give it about at least a month before I update operating systems. Let's try it again, but now I'm going to share from the screen of the Mac.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And then I have to remember about where I actually am. That looks nice.
That does. If you just move around.
No,
losing it again.
No. It's not having it. Okay.
We've got a question from Barney. How long do you give it for the PHP major version?
This is on 7.4. Before I actually created a PHP 8 project yesterday, I think it was. I don't know where to go with this here because nothing is working.
Do you happen to have an alternative machine?
Can I do that? No, I can't do it on an alternative machine. I was toying with the idea, but I don't think I've even got an IDE set up on an internal machine. What's changed from 3 weeks ago? Absolutely nothing.
Because it's strange we're seeing it on both the IDE and Google Slides, and it seems to be the same parts of the screen that aren't visible.
Yeah. What about if I? Okay, this is probably, in order to try and save the talk, is probably the last ditch attempt, I think, which is I'm going to fire up OBS and I'm going to route my camera through OBS, which is how I would normally deliver this talk. It might chop it off, but at the same time, at least I can get something actually working that's visible. So I'm going to change my camera to OBS virtual camera, which will then do something like that. That's fine.
Let's just remove you for a moment, Jim, just while you're setting yourself up there. We can still see you, so as soon as your camera's back on, I'll add you back onto the stage. Okay, there you are.
There's my virtual camera. Okay, that's better because at least I'm cropped far more than I should be. But if I change scene, that looks better already. So if I then, now I'm going to move everything back again. So back to the other screen.
The joys of this style of event.
This is actually the first time that I've had the sort of the classic live code demo technical difficulties. I've not actually had it before.
It's always that live demo. What can possibly go wrong?
Like, what could go wrong? Surely, absolutely nothing. Monitor. Okay, monitor that. Then if I go to, okay, what do I need? I need, that looks fine. And finally, the slides. Okay, so if I go full screen now, I'll just have to like flick through. So yeah, if you go full screen now for me, that should look, that's okay. I can work with that. You can't see my face, which has got to be an advantage for everyone.
Right, Jim, I'll drop off and hand it back to you now.
That's not too bad. Yeah, that's not too bad. You only need to be able to see the code editor for most of what I do anyway, so that's fine. And you can see, yeah, okay. Oh, right. Oh, goodness me. Where were we? OBS can handle graphics drivers, but for some reason StreamYard can't. That's fantastic. Yes, I want to go back to here. I want to go back to Xdebug. I was talking about the Xdebug, the INI switches. So, yes, Xdebug mode is new, and we've got quite, debug and develop is what I'm going to do as default for this talk. So it's kind of simple. But you've got develop, coverage, debug, GC stats, profile, and trace. All of these things that are comma separated values do various things. So GC collection is quite cool. You've got like statistics for garbage collection if you're if your app is falling over with memory usage and things like that. You've also got code coverage if you want to hook it up to PHP unit, which is quite cool. I spoke to you about client host and Xdebug start with request we covered as well, which is give me that in the foreground if you hit the server. So now we need to inject this debug file that I've created in that folder into the Docker file, right? So we're going to use Docker Compose, and in Docker Compose we've got let's go to where's our container? There's our PHP container. So in volumes, I'm going to add a new volume, and this volume is going to be mounting that Xdebug configuration. There it is. So on the left you've got the local path, which is docker php xdebug.ini, and on the right is the PHP ini configuration file where PHP automatically compiles any kind of ini file that it picks up. which is cool. That's done. There is one more caveat for this, which if you're using PHPStorm, if you don't add this, it will just not work properly because it won't be able to assign your project to the underlying file system. It's a bit of a pain in the butt. This, so it's the variable is called PHP IDE config, and it's a string that looks like that, where its server name equals, and for the order project, it's ukrestaurants.test. And to show you why that's relevant and why you need to look it up, if we go into PHPStorm settings and we go to servers, there it is. This server screen, which I generally tend to hate, but you have to use it for this. Host is there for this Docker environment. UK-restaurants.test is the etc hosts reference, and we're using port 443 because everyone's using HTTPS. The important thing here is the absolute path. If you don't set the absolute path, then it will try and resolve it for you, and it won't work. And the reason is because the incoming request is from the public file, and that's the same for Laravel, and that's the same for Symfony. Doesn't matter what you're using. So you have to map it. I've mapped it to var w vhost, which is the nginx directory. If you don't do that, you won't be able to navigate through the code successfully. So the last thing here is setting the port mapping for listening. So if you go to Xdebug and type it in here, you get given a port. Set it to 9003, which is the default port for Xdebug now from Xdebug 3. Xdebug 2 was 9000 or 9001, so you shouldn't have to worry about that anymore with conflicts of PHP FPM. Cool. And so with that in mind, I'm now going to rebuild, and I'm going to click that, and it still works. Hooray. So if I go clear that, Docker compose down, Docker compose up, run it as a daemon, and build. I don't know how much this is going to build. It shouldn't be building much because I've cached it. Yeah, that's nice. So the INI file plus the Docker compose and the Docker file all add up to Xdebug hopefully running. So there is a way. Obviously, I need to make sure that this is working right. So here is the opening page for order. I'm just going to refresh the page to make sure that we are actually up and running. Are we up and running? Yes, we are. That is the opening page for the application I'm hosting. What was wrong with my graphics driver? Because that works absolutely fine. So I'm going to make sure that I've got Xdebug running. Now, previously I did things like SSHing into the container and things like that. I'm not going to do it that way this time because there's a much easier way with Xdebug 3, which looks a lot nicer. So I'm going to find an entry point to my application. So if I go to app.php and bootstrap, and before we return the app, I'm going to do a die, put test in there, refresh the page, test, cool. You can't actually see it, but it's just above where you're looking at. And if we go in here, instead of PHP info, I'm going to do Xdebug info, and it's so cutting edge that PHPStorm can't even autocomplete it. Xdebug info, and then die. A regular die that I didn't even do a DD. Cool. If I refresh the page, Xdebug has a panel that you'll be familiar with, everyone, that looks very, very similar to PHP info, to the Zen engine. So here we are. You can see from the first bit where it's got features of what's enabled and disabled. So in Xdebug 3, you can now enable or disable individual features. It works really, really well for performance. And it just means if you want to do basic stuff like the step debugger, and we'll go through that in a second, then you can just switch on that for performance. It also means that if you want to have a staging environment where you just have the step debugger on, or you just want to have tracing on, you can do it. It won't be absolutely appalling. Everything else is there. We want to make sure that our environment variables have made it in. So if we go to, for instance, where's our, there we go. Xdebug client host is the entry point. So host.docker.internal is on there. Cool. So with that in mind, we're going to start a debugging session. So I'm going to take off these, and I'm going to start a debugging session by logging into my app. So if I refresh the page and go to merchant login, Here's a login I prepared earlier. Test@test.com. There it is. This is a login. Shows me a dashboard of some stuff. I'm not going to go into what it is in the app, but if you want to, you can check it out yourself. And if we go to root, I've got at the bottom of the screen, I've got the Laravel debugging bar open. So if I click on that, it shows me the controller that I've used, which is called dashboard controller. It's an invocable controller, so it's only got one method. So if I want to start a debugging session, presumably if I go to that controller, I could just put a breakpoint down. So I'm going to do that. In here, dashboard controller, there it is. And here it is, and I should have an invoke. There it is, there's an invoke. So at the beginning of here, when we start doing some logic, I'm going to set a breakpoint, which I had this problem before. So now I'm going to quit PHPStorm, and then I'm going to reopen it, because when you change a setting on it, it stops the breakpoints from appearing with its nice little circle. There we go. Which doesn't matter because the OBS has actually cut it off. Anyway, the joys of live stuff. You can see that I've highlighted the line with a red line, okay? So that tells me to stop the program at that point in that invocable controller. So if you hit the listen button, which you can't see me hitting because you can't see me doing it, but there's a telephone line icon that basically says switch the debugger on and off. So I go to listen. So now with Xdebug server running and with the listener on, everything should be in place. So if I go back to my app and I refresh the page, I didn't bring that up. The debugger brought that up, and it brought it into the foreground. Hooray! Close that. Right, so I can talk you through a few kind of like, I'm gonna have to do this without you being able to see a lot of some of what's going on, but unfortunately my resolution of my screen. Hooray! So there's three panels in PHPStorm. If you use VS Code, I think it looks pretty similar. These that show you a live debugging session, right? So on the left we have a dynamic call stack. A call stack panel. So what it looks like, do you know what? I'm actually going to go back to my slides. I'm being thrown sort of all over the place because I need to do just a quick recap of everything, because there's a lot to cover here in a smaller amount of time. If I make that not full screen, maybe I can make it sort of like whatever, you can just about see that. Just a quick things before, now that we've done the installation, which is the Docker file, pickle install Xdebug. You want a custom PHP INI with environment variables for Xdebug that it's used, and then inject it via Docker Compose. You have to set a weird thing called PHP IDE config, which looks like server name equals my, and then you give it the local etc host DNS name. PHPStorm listens at 9003 by default. The client host is docker.internal.host, and you want start with request. That says start with request, and you want yes. And Xdebug mode. These are the modes that I described earlier. So you can have off, it doesn't work at all. Develop coverage, debug, GC stats, profile, and trace. So that's that bit. So now the demo is going on to actually doing actually showing you the live debug panel, which is what we got onto. So a quick walkthrough of what you can just about see. The panel on the left. So the panel on the left is the stack trace. So if you use anyone that uses Symfony or uses Laravel knows probably if you have an exception, the exception will trigger, and you'll get the I can't remember what the name of either Laravel or Symfony sort of special little apps that they've got that actually give you like a debugging thing that enables you to look through the stack trace. It's a stack trace off PHP, except with Xdebug you've paused runtime, so you've got it live, which means if you've got it live, you can navigate through it. So if I just drop the panel here, you can see the editor, and if I then scroll through, let's make that full screen. If I scroll through this panel on the left by just going down, the editor, which you can just about see if I just move that down. The editor will update. We'll actually just focus on the actual point of code that you're focusing on in the call stack. So every single thing in runtime is actually available to you, which, when coupled with the panel to the right, which is the variables panel, is pretty powerful, because the variables panel also updates in real time as well. It just shows you the state. All of the state is available to us at any point in time in runtime. So if I go to controller, the next line down, which is controller 54, and it calls user function array, the variables on the right hand side in that panel, I'm scrolling on there, are all updated, right? So I can then drill down into them. So it tells you everything that's available at that time. So here are all of the variables that are set. So that's pretty cool. I've missed the trick by just not getting rid of the watches, because I'm going to show you watches in a minute. So navigation is pretty straightforward. So it's these buttons here that I'm sort of scrolling through here. You've got step over, which executes the current line and goes to the next line. You've got step into. Step into is if you want to execute the next line. Instead of going to the next line, if you've got a method call of any sort, you're drilling one layer into it. So if you want to look at what is happening in a method, in fact, I can actually scroll to the top here, and I've got I'm on a line called all statuses, which is an array. Just going to run to the next line. There we go. There's a line called dashboard metrics here, and it calls a repository method called get front-end statistics for merchant with date range. If I go to step over, it will run it and go to the next line. But if I go to step into, which I'll do now, it then takes me drills into the actual method, and it's going via the model first. So all of the framework is actually all of Laravel's framework, or if you're using Symfony, it will drill into all of Symfony's framework stuff. The next navigation is for step into, and that is if you want to step into all of the vendor level stuff, all the third-party stuff, which can be useful when you've got when you're debugging third-party libraries. And step out, complete what you're in and come out of it if you want to. If you're done and you don't want to look at that particular chunk of code in that method, then you want to come out of it, right? So a really nice line that I like is the last one of these, which is run to cursor. So I'm just going to stop the debugger because I've started navigating myself into sort of painting myself into a corner. If I run the request again, gateway timeout because I've stopped. If I refresh the page again and it stopped, if I scroll down further down in this controller method and click on that if statement, I can then click on run to cursor and it will run to the cursor. It's actually just stopped, which I was kind of not expecting. Stop the session. I don't have my chat open, and I'm willing to bet that Derek's probably saying you probably haven't done this or it's not available. Let's go back to this. Let's go back to here. Okay. T-post session was because the breakpoint was resolved to this point. And you can resolve. Don't show again. I don't care about that. I want to select here and then go to that. No, good. Something's changed. And I can't explain that. Can you tell that I need to polish up this? This was really, really slick before, and now there's all sorts of things going on. Anyway, I need to figure out why run to cursor doesn't work. I'm going to run the risk of actually doing some live debugging now, and I'm going to not do it via the web interface. I'm going to do it via the unit tests. So now I can start praying even more. If I go to the command line and I SSH into the box, so docker ps docker executes keep alive UKR PHP, and I want to run bash. Cool. If I run vendor binary PHP units, and I'm going to filter by a specific thing. Can't type. Filter can add item to order. Run PHP unit. And can't see properly. You can't see because of the far left, but that fails. So it fails because it wanted a 200, but it's got a 422 instead, which is bad entity. So that has failed on adds to order test. So if I go into the IDE and bring up that test, which is what is it called? Add to order test. There it is. And it failed on line 114. Cool. So it's an API thing. You can see from line 108. Response equals this JSON post. Going to post to that endpoint, and I'm going to assert that it's an HTTP OK, but it's not. I got a HTTP 422. So the reason why Xdebug came in, it came into its own a bit here is in unit tests. We're emulating either API requests or emulating, or we're running browsers. We're emulating browser stack. Not browser stack. Webpack. My mind is just like a complete sort of like the new thing that's Selenium that I can't even remember what its name is. So when you're doing these things in the background with unit tests, it's kind of hard to unless you're dumping, and you have to dump all of the time. Like dump the response, get body, dump the response, get. So instead, we're going to drill down into why that thing has failed. So the endpoint is API version 1 order, so we can find the controller for where that endpoint hits. So that controller is API add the request. This is a Laravel thing, so I'm going to find out where the controller is using this. This is a request, but I want to know what's using you. And it's called add controller. There we go. So here it is. It's add controller. So we have an endpoint that is add this thing to an item, and it's an invocable controller, and it uses a custom request called API add item to order request, which is an extension off the Laravel request, which is in itself is an extension off the Symfony request. So this is the thing that's failing. So if I go to put a breakpoint on here, and I have the listener on, and I run the unit test again, it will tell me, it will give me a little bit more info with my sort of Sherlock on. It fails again, but nothing gets hit. And that tells me that the controller is not being hit. If the controller is not being hit, then what's being hit? So if I go into this request, which is API add item to order request, we've got a set of rules here. So inventory ID, variant ID, merchant, inventory options. These are all basically configuration options in Laravel. So if I put a breakpoint on here instead in the rules, and then run it, I'm going to see what happens. Okay, it's been triggered. So we can navigate through and keep on stepping through to see a bit more about what's going on. So if I keep on skipping, we get to form requests and we get to the validator. So the validator is just doing some stuff now, like setting itself into the service container and things like that. Validator, set container, this containers, add some extensions. If method exists with validator, cool, do some stuff. Cool. If instance fails, so there's a logic check here. If the instance fails, then go to the next line, which is this failed validation. And I've just skipped through to the next line, and that's failed. So if we look at the panel, we can find out why that's failed. We've got an instance in the variables panel of instance. Just going to drill down into that. And there is a payload called failed rules, and it's an array of 1. Open that up. Variant ID. Scroll down, required. The variant ID is required. That's our 422. So if we look at the test, we'll probably see that variant ID is missing. So I'm going to close that. Look at the test. What are we giving them in the test? We have a variable called order item payload. There it is. Merchant, inventory ID, inventory options. It's not on there. So it should look something like this. Variance ID. So I should have something like inventory variance. And I've got a property on that called ID. So that's what was missing. So if I've added that in, what happens when I run the test? Run. And my breakpoint has been hit because I didn't switch it off. There's a button here which you can't see on the far left, which is called Resume Program. I'm just going to keep on clicking it to let the request finish. And there we go. The test has passed, which you can see some of it. You can't see the little green thing. That's nice, but that's unit test. That's unit testing being debugged in real time with a real product. Cool. Watchers. I'm going to go through watchers, and I'm going to go through real time request modification. So a watcher, for anyone that knows that does like various bits with JS, you can set watchers to things in JS if you want to untangle the spaghetti that is JavaScript. So it's no different really. We're going to set something that actually just watches one variable. So if I go back to my controller, dashboard controller, and I'm going to line 40. We've got dashboard metrics. So this is where I'm going to start inspecting stuff and looking around it. So I'm going to set a breakpoint there, listen for it. And I'm going to open up the watchers window, which is here. Whereabouts is that? There is. So I'm going to watch dashboard metrics, but first of all, I'm just going to trigger the session off. So if I go to Firefox, go to my apps thing, press refresh, there we go. So I'm on line 32 at the moment. And then watchers, here I'm going to set a watcher for dashboard metrics. Press return. And at the moment it says it can't evaluate it, which is fine because it hasn't been set yet. But if I do step through, there we go. I'm on line 40. Still hasn't been set. Now it's been set. Cool. So that is dashboard metrics is comprised of 4 things: new order, processing, completed, and rejected, which is 83333. Cool. So to show a watcher in action, I'm going to do some stuff. I'm going to do some stuff now. I'm going to actually do some code. So dashboard metrics, which is an array, now equals this my mystery method, and takes itself dashboard metrics, and then I'm going to modify it again and just mutate it a bit more. Dashboard metrics equals this my other mystery method, dashboard metrics. Cool. So I'm mutating that variable a bit. If I stop the session, I've got the breakpoints on there. So I'm going to just rerun this again. Stopped, and bring up our watcher on the right-hand panel. Cannot evaluate expression. That's because it hasn't been run yet. Press the next line, and dashboard metrics equals an array of 4. Just going to drill down into that. There we go. As expected, 8333. That's okay. But I'm doing a mutation on it. What happens? Nothing. Looks exactly the same. Dashboard metrics equals 83333. And then, so my mystery method has run, and now I'm going to run my other mystery method. And what happens then? Bingo. New order, processing, completed, rejected equals 43, 75, 89, 72. So we know that that's mutating it. So if I stop the debugging session and then go into my other mystery method, into the editor window, we can see what this is doing, which it takes a payload and then it adds a random integer between 1 and 150. And that's the watcher in action, showing you how you can trace stuff. In conjunction with that, we can do, in a similar kind of vein, we could do runtime modification. And I'm going to use the same method, that other mystery method, this one that we're in at the moment, to modify runtime. So If I switch off the debugger and get rid of these lines, I'm going to get rid of my mystery. I'm going to comment out my other mystery method. And I'm going to run this now with the debugger off. And we get our dashboard. Cool. You can see in the actual app, excuse it, it's a development copy, so there's like SVGs all over the place and these lines down the middle. Obviously, the production version doesn't look like this. You can see that we've got new orders 8333 in there. So that is actually the result of that payload is a Blade template where it's actually reading those statistics out. So I'm going to modify it. If I get rid of that line there, okay. If I go to if I switch the debugger on, and I'm going to leave the breakpoint at the dashboard metrics there, I'm going to rerun it so I fire off the debugger. Cool, and they're going to run that line. If I let runtime complete now, it will be exactly the same. It'll be 8333 whatever. If I go to evaluate its expression, I now have a terminal window. So I can do it as a terminal window as if it was JavaScript, console.log, whatever. So dashboard metrics equals this, my other mystery method, dashboard metrics. Cool. Press return, and then we get 89, 12, 114, 139. Close that, and now I'm going to let runtime actually continue. So I've run the method, but I've just completed runtime, okay? So if I go back to my app, my request cycle is actually completed. And we can see that's new orders 89, 12, 114, 139. So with Xdebug, if you interrupt runtime, you can change absolutely anything. If it's service calls or booting the service container, you can do pretty much anything. So you can imagine as a debugging tool, that's pretty vital. That's cool. Conditional breakpoints is the last kind of thing of this. So when we add a breakpoint, we can, if we right-click in PHPStorm, we can make it a conditional breakpoint. So imagine we've got, some users are experiencing problems and some aren't, that kind of thing. Don't really know what it is. So if I set a breakpoint on this line, you can just see the line highlighted from there. If I right-click on it, you can see a panel. If I just try and take it off full screen, I'll just move it. Here we go. So for the sake of actually being able to see it, if I right-click on that, I get a little panel. And I can set a condition for this breakpoint of whether it gets hit or not. So I'm going to do merchant. There's a property on the merchant entity in the ORM called allow table service. So to put allow table service and strict types and 1. Done. And you can see the breakpoint has a little question mark. Can't really sort of zoom in it, but that blue sort of box there, which now means I'm only going to hit this breakpoint if the conditions are met. I have the debugger still on live, so I'm now going to go and refresh the page on this dashboard and see what happens. And the dashboard loads. So the condition hasn't been hit. Nothing's changed. Log out. And I'm going to log in with a different login. This one. Try that. And it's brought PHPStorm up into the limelight, and there we are. It's brought that up because allow table service is 1. So, for instance, if you want to actually see, why, I can do the evaluation window here and go merchant, which is my current merchant. This is a bit of Laravel Landy, but to array, press return, and it gives you all of the things that are all of the attributes as part of this. And allow table service will be on there. There we are. Allow table service is an integer of 1 in the middle. So there you go. That's conditional breakpoints in action. Back to the slides. Things that we've seen. I wonder if I can try and sort of. Oh, I'm not. I'm not going to faff too much about it. So, can I make this? Can I make this not full screen? There we go. You can probably see a little bit more there. Breakpoints, console and steps, watchers, dynamic stack trace navigation, conditional breakpoints and runtime modifications, and profiling. These are all of the things that I've just attempted to show you whilst struggling horrendously with technical problems over the internet. But we're doing sports casual debugging, so these are our comparable cars. So I'm going to assign a for Mondeo to breakpoints, console, and steps and watches in Ruby or Python or JavaScript. If you do Node or if you do it on the front end, whatever. Things like breakpoints and console, you can just press F12 and get DevTools up and start mucking around with either stepping through things if you want to by having breakpoints, or use the console, or using breakpoints. And watches, that watcher window is available to you as well. But the dynamic stack trace navigation of going through an entire runtime cycle, a stateful run cycle of a PHP thread, and then being able to navigate through everything and every variable at runtime, that's pretty advanced. So I've that and conditional breakpoints when it comes to debugging spaghetti code and legacy applications. I've given it the BMW Mini. Runtime modification is especially with Xdebug 3 now, where you can switch on only the parts that you need to have debugging as efficient with memory usage and CPU usage as possible. Plus the profiling, which we'll get onto very, very briefly. I'm only going to show you sort of like a brief example of that. Those are pretty much the sort of the top of the range ability to turbocharge your software development. So profiling is, I'm only going to show you, I'm not going to actually do a full sort of installation of it, but the example that I used is with Xdebug and there's a container called Webgrind, which is a PHP application that reads cache grind files, which are the standard output, which is the output of the profiling sessions that Xdebug runs when it starts a session. And in Docker, I'm just going to show you quickly what that kind of looks like. So if we go to the IDE, stop that. Blah, 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 get rid of the debug. So if we go to Docker Compose, and here's one I installed earlier. Here is Webgrind. Just move that to the side so you can see it as per usual. It's ridiculous. Webgrind. So the image is Jock, the jockey, DK for Denmark. Thanks for that one, Derek. Webgrind, you can find that in Docker Hub. And importantly, it has a mounting directory thing, so it uses the temp directory. Any cache grind directories that get thrown into the temp directory in that container get read by the cache grind volume. So you need to make sure that you output cache grind files to there. You can do that via the PHP INI, the Xdebug INI that I created. Here it is. So I'm just going to add a few more switches to that. You want xdebug.output directory, and that will just throw stuff out. So what I'm doing here is I'm telling Xdebug where to output its cache grind files, and then via Docker Compose, I'm mounting that into the directory that Webgrind reads off. And importantly, to switch on the profiler, you've now got xdebug. Oh, good, my cat is here to help me debug. Luckily, he's going straight out the cat flap. So xdebug.mode, and you can put in profile here, and that switches on the profiler. So if I was to rebuild the container now, it will have it on. I'm not going to do it as a full cycle because having the profiler on obviously is quite heavy with memory usage, but that's kind of the point of it because you're profiling everything. So if I show you an example of that dashboard that we looked at with the profiler on, it looks a little something like this. I've now got a container open, and it's localhost 8081 is the port. Just going to zoom in a little bit. And Webgrind is going to read the first file that it comes across, which is this one here. And this is so I'll zoom in a little bit more. So, and I'm just going to invocation count. So what I'm doing here is I'm just ordering the amount of times that something's been called, right? So here the top thing is PHP is null and PHP is array. But if you scroll down a little bit more, you'll get some. Not surprisingly, for instance, the application container of Laravel has been called 2,059 times. So you can order via profile. It gives you the cost of the cost in milliseconds and the amount of time that's been spent execution time. If I go to a call graph, it will actually render an SVG of the entire call graph of the entry point of the application. So if I zoom out here, you need to be quite efficient on how you use this, because obviously this is the entire one PHP runtime of an encapsulated framework. But if you scroll sort of through it and navigate, you can pretty much start to see where bottlenecks occur and things like that. I mean, yeah, it's pretty big. If I try and drill down into something that's being used a lot, 39 times there of 0.19% of usage, that is array set. So things like collections in Laravel world are used like loads, but you can start to get a kind of better idea of where your application has bottlenecks and things like this. If you want to drill like further down to it and you want like a platform as a service, things like Blackfly.io are kind of what you want, really. So that's kind of like a quick example. I need to sort of there's things on here that I need to drill down to with Xdebug 3 a lot more. But the conclusion of just a quick intro into Xdebug, right, is time is money, but it's also an investment. So the biggest problem that everyone comes across is that time is money. I do not have time to roll out Xdebug across my stack. And the reason is because there's lots of arbitrary stuff that's to do with Xdebug that I can't be bothered to look at the documentation and figure out how it works. Okay, fine. But like anything, it's an investment. And we found at Jump24, for all of our local projects, when enabling and taking the time to get our local stacks running with Xdebug, that it's an investment that's paid off massively, especially with older legacy projects where you have complete. You can just put a breakpoint in at any time. If you want to put someone on a project and they go and you give them the repo and it has a series of installation steps. A lot of we've done our DevOps procedures, so a lot of it's run by sort of Composer and things like that, and we have commit hooks being listened to. Take this and install and run Docker Compose up, and off it goes. But also that's going to run Xdebug. So at any point in your IDE, even if you want VS Code, which I might do another presentation on that at some point, put a breakpoint on it, and you've got the entire runtime. So deciphering arbitrary code and other people's code and legacy code where it's nonsense, the ability to have Xdebug 3 running on that and to actually untangle it is a massive investment that will save your business a ton of money. And that's just how it is. It also levels up your team because it gives you the ability to look through the core stack the way it does and to drill down into how an actual framework is working. And like for instance, we have a big problem with the email validation right now in one of our Laravel stacks. And it's because the underlying library, which attempts to resolve a valid DNS when you have a emails thrown out by the faker library are incompatible with it, and they shouldn't be. And we used Xdebug to drill into why it was actually not working, and found that it was a third-party bug, so we had to switch it off. Stuff like that is why not level up your team, because it gives, especially if you've got sort of like developers starting out, giving them full range of a stack like that is going to increase their experience very, very quickly. We've started looking at PDD. We do TDD at Jump24 by sort of default, right? But we're looking at performance-driven development. So we're looking at, if you ship a feature, then we have a profiler. You've seen now how easy it is with Xdebug 3 to actually just switch on the profiler like that. And that has more advanced features that we need to look at now that enable us to switch off. And it gives you like an insight, for instance, with an ORM of whether you've introduced, you've coded a feature, and before you ship it or before you even try and commit to the code base, we're doing performance-driven development of, I'm going to switch the profiler on, have I introduced like an N+1 deep problem with a bottleneck? Stuff like that. Again, time is money, but it also means that our developers are leveling up extremely quickly, and that's the kind of stuff you want to be investing in. Thank you for listening, if indeed you are, because I've had about 1 million. Basically, if you're doing a virtual talk and your platform doesn't work, you kind of have to muddle your way through. So if you are just about still looking at this talk, thank you very much for putting up with it. I've been Jim Seconde. If you want to see the work that we do, or you want to check out the code base that you view tonight, there you go, Jump 24. Have a look at our engineering blog. There is an accompanying post to this blog, to this talk. I am actually going to update the blog post or write it. You want to update it? Probably update it for Xdebug 3 for the new features that are being rolled out. Thank you for listening, and good night. And as is on form for the start of the talk, Craig, you're on mute again.
Yep. Yeah, I just realised that. I was clapping to myself and saying thank you. No, that was a great talk, and I think you handled the technical issues very well.
That was awful.
It happens, right? It happens.
Live code demos, not even once.
Yeah. Well, it worked. It was a really good talk. Yeah, I've not had the chance yet to use Xdebug 3, so I was really interested.
This is actually as Derek would say, because I started tweeting him honestly about like an hour before, well, 2 hours before. I just thought I'll just change this to Debug 3. It'd be a piece of piss. And yeah, it wasn't. I mean, like, he's done a lot of work. There's apart from the performance is just completely different of you being able to switch on what you want and what you don't want. Things like performance on the garbage collection and stuff like that is big stuff that I need to drill down a bit more into now. But that kind of stuff is going to be quite interesting to rewrite the talk to include a bit more of that.
Fantastic. I was just checking in the chat if anyone has any questions. I think we've got time. We've got maybe 5 or 10 minutes of a bit of Q&A.
Yeah, sure. Can I just quickly pause because I really need to go to the loo, and that will honestly be about 45 seconds.
Okay.
Whilst you compile.
Yeah, hopefully that'll be enough time for some questions. So Derek said it's only 8 days old. Yeah, I did see the announcement. I just not had a chance to have a play around yet. So, is there any questions? For those who couldn't see, well, obviously everyone who couldn't see the slides, we'll get Jim to post them as well online, just so you've got access to them. So, okay. So hopefully, Derek, you noticed some of them issues. So hopefully they'll get resolved. So we're actually debugging the debugger, which is interesting. Bit of Xdebuggingception. Thanks for that question, Ben. I'll just wait until Jim's back.
Here I am.
Okay, we have a question from Ben, which is asked, how feasible is it to use Xdebug without PHPStorm or VS Code?
Without either?
Yep.
That's probably going to be more of a Derek question. I have seen that. You can. I'm trying to think of use cases. I can actually think of use cases of like if you want to do like if you've written custom command line kind of stuff. But you can run the Xdebug. Hold on, if I'm just going to bring up the documentation. There's a command line enabler that enables you to start single stepping with the command line if you want to without an IDE. Single step. Alternative ways of triggering the debugger. So you can call Xdebug break. So it's got custom. One of the things I didn't actually mention is, one reason alone for just putting Xdebug without you even using the steps is that it greatly enhances var dump anyway. So you get the Xdebug enhanced version of it. But with methods in the command line in code, you can actually you can start and stop the session with Xdebug commands. So, I mean, in terms of how feasible it is, I mean, yeah, it's pretty feasible. I mean, it's like, you know, it's even just kind of like, you know, there with kind of up there with ease. So if you use Xdebug break, the method, the base method, it emits a breakpoint to a debug client. So, I mean, for debug clients, I mean, this bit might be one for Derek, but for debug clients, if you don't want to use an IDE, you probably could have something listening from a command line perspective.
Okay. Yeah, I think Derek just posted a URL. So you do need a client. He's doing a simple command line one. And
that's kind of what I expected. Yeah. So okay. And it'll just output stuff on the command line. So if you want to do something really, really manual, because you've got that kind of because you've got a call stack to command line application, then yeah, cool. You've pretty much you're covered.
Okay, perfect. Any more questions from everyone? Okay, so Barney's also said that there's also one for Vim. So
of course, there's always something for Vim. Why wouldn't there be?
Vdebug.
Actually, that's a really. I mean, we're talking about sort of like manually having like a sort of a simple client on the command line. Then yeah, I mean that's going to go hand in hand with doing stuff on Vim. For those of you that are sort of like that are insane, like the CTO of my old company who had Arch Linux and Sway and insisted on doing absolutely everything in Vim with about 900 tmux multiplex splits and things like that. But there's always something.
Yeah, and Derek's mentioned that there's one for Emacs as well. So Geben.
For the even real developers, only debug with Emacs and Xdebug.
Fantastic. Okay. Okay, so it's pronounced Gaben. Okay. Thanks, Derek. Any more questions? I think there's a few of us left.
For those that lasted.
Oh, well, we have a few left in the chat. Okay. So yeah, I mentioned when you were away, Jim, that if you maybe post your slides online.
Yeah, sure.
I think there's a few who wanted maybe just to check them out afterwards as well. And maybe a link to that blog post as well. I know you said you're going to update it, but perhaps you can maybe just
so you can see it doesn't contain any of the sort of the cool new features of Xdebug of Xdebug 3, but if you want to get started with it, it starts to give you a bit of an example. I'm just going to paste this into the private chat for now. There we go.
Okay, cool. I'll just post that in the main chat as well, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, cool. That's what. Sorry, I posted that in there to try and put it in the main chat, but I haven't gone to the main chat because my browser doesn't play nicely with it.
No, it's okay. Yeah, I've just posted it in the main chat. So anyone who's watching, if you just want to, if you've never used Xdebug and want to, have a poke around since you've seen Jim's talk and seen how amazing it is, there's a link there to the Jump 24 blog. So
there is this is a really fun kind of plug now, but there's going to be another talk. There's going to be another post, which is a follow-up, which is not actually about Xdebug. It's how we prepared and got the equipment to actually be able to suddenly go online with COVID to give talks. I feel like we're going to publish that like tomorrow, but I think we need to amend it for what happens if you use StreamYard and you basically can't present.
Fantastic. Okay. I think maybe we've got time for one more question. Maybe. Maybe not a question, maybe a comment. Don't know. Anyone else using Xdebug? Have you found it? Any problems? Have you actually moved and started using Xdebug 3? Apart from Derek. That's a great tool. Derek, this is a side note. How long has Xdebug been out now?
2002.
2000. Yeah, don't email me. Don't email me. 2002. That's yeah. I think that's longer than I've been developing. Wow. Well, professionally anyway. That's a long time. Okay. So Barney said that he's missing Xdebug since recently. He's been working on. It's been running a shared server, and the team doesn't have it. Right. Okay, but he has been using it in previous projects. Yeah, I think I need to. I've been using it on some personal projects, but yeah, it's.
I think rather than
so you were saying about the team, leveling up the team.
It comes. That's where we've seen it have its maximum impact, where you hand over a project and you need to start on it, and it saves the amount of questions that it starts, like simple questions about domain logic, where you can actually work out from Xdebug what's going on instead, is a big developer time versus money. It means you don't have to bug tech leads as much, and that is just that's worth its weight in gold.
It's music to my ears.
Yeah.
Okay, James has asked, what sort of performance gains have you seen between Xdebug version 2 and version 3?
I don't know, because I installed Xdebug on this project about 2 hours ago. I know from looking at benchmarks that it's a big performance. It's a big performance game. Derek will probably put in the chat of like how what I think with Xdebug 3, one of the sort of priorities was performance, and so there is a big difference.
Okay, yeah, Derek's just shared a benchmarking link.
There we go. It's on Xdebug's actual web, on the website, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay. I think maybe a final question is Sabani's asked, since you're using Xdebug with PHPStorm, has anyone tried committing PHPStorm settings? Does that help?
Is this the sort of the cloud settings thing where you're supposed to set? I've got to say, I have a love-hate relationship with PHPStorm. I've not tried on Xdebug settings to actually export them from the point of view of you log into PHPStorm and then it retrieves loads of settings and all and everything. But there are certain things that PHPStorm does as an IDE that is just completely unparalleled. Like nothing else can do it as well. Yeah. And there are some things that are just like god awful that I can't stand. And I did kind of allude to it earlier on in the talk, but the servers part, you have to set up the servers part if you want to use, if you want to get the PHPStorm debugging panel talking to Xdebug to listen, right? And things like the server name. I have a larger project for Jump 24 at the moment, and it's split over about 2 microservices and two or three monoliths. Having one session listen to multiple kind of sources is an absolute nightmare, and I can't stand it. And it's not really done from a UX perspective as very well. So if there's anyone from JetBrains sort of watching, let's go through especially if one of the dev roles are listening. Let's go through some sort of product feedback. But my personal experience from actually running it with this is that it's harder to set up Xdebug with PHPStorm than it is with VS Code. And I think that VS Code is a lot more straightforward. I don't know about cloud settings and things like that, but it is easy to set up. However, you are missing various things from day to day that I find kind of vital. If you're using Symfony, you're sort of laughing with PHPStorm, but I honestly, like Laravel's facades and stuff like that, it doesn't play very nicely. And I had the Laravel idea kind of plugin on it as well.
Okay. Yeah, I think Barney meant committing the PHPStorm settings to the project repo. So I think in the is it the .ide folder?
We like for order we can't really do that because it's open source and it's a public repo, and it's not really up to us to dictate how your IDE is set up. And we can do sort of, I mean, there are some linting rules and things like that. For private stuff, if you've got it hosted on GitLab or Bitbucket, I'd probably recommend doing it. How successful that is, not sure.
Okay. Excellent. Okay. Just looking, see if we've got any more questions. Maybe one more. And then, okay. Just give that a second. Okay. Looks like there's no more questions. Okay. So I think that might be it. So once again, thanks Jim, for taking your time out. I know a bit more kind of Zoom kind of or online meeting syndrome is once again hit all of us. So yeah, I'd just like to thank you. Yeah, so just maybe I guess some announcements. I guess so. Yeah, we'll be back in January. Where we'll be a lot more regular. I know we've missed the last couple of months for various reasons, like I mentioned at the beginning. So from January onwards, hopefully we'll be back. I'm not sure when we'll be back to in-person talks. If I have no idea. We'll need to check government regulations and speak to Sainsbury's, I guess. See what they say. But yeah, again, don't know if anyone saw the link. Let me just maybe share my screen again. Let's just get that on. Share. Okay. Let's just. So yeah, again, what's going on? If you're not joined already, PHP London, we have a Slack channel. So you can pester me or just give general feedback. And again, about speakers, so we're always looking for speakers, as I said before, all levels, all tech, laptop, Mac, Windows, we support you all. So hopefully we won't be seeing any issues in future. But yeah, just check out that link. Again, it's a Google form, just fill it out. And yeah, I'll drop you an email. Yeah, use it here. I'm missing the last slide, which is usually the map to the pub, but yeah, it's not happening at the moment. Yeah, it's a shame. I do miss seeing everyone and catching up in the pub and then at Sainsbury's and pizza and beer, which it is what it is, I guess. Has anyone got any announcements in the chat just before we all head off? I mean, we do have I guess on the big orange heart. So if you're in the live chat, if you want to click on, I guess the lobby, is it the lobby? No, sorry, the social link at the top. We can, if anyone wants to have a quick chat afterwards. Okay, so Derek said try Xdebug 3. Okay, so that's an order to everyone to try Xdebug 3. If not, you're not allowed back. No, I'm kidding. So yeah, I think that's probably the end of it. I can't see anyone else having any more announcements. But yeah, for those of you still in tier 3, or then sorry, don't know what else to say, but it sucks. Yeah, just hope hope the vaccine is available to everyone, and yeah, that everyone is staying safe and doing okay. So I guess with that, yeah, I'd like to thank Jim once again. I'd thank Dan as well for the Big Orange Hat platform. It's great. It makes my life a lot simpler. I think it's a lot better than Zoom. A few more options. I like the live chat. Yeah, and I like the social bit at the end. So yeah, thank you all, and we'll see you in January. So Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, and stay safe.